Despite being one of the more powerful jobs at the start of Final Fantasy V, when you get access to your first 6 jobs from the Wind Crystal, the Monk is definitely falls off. Probably only anywhere between the end of first game, World 1 up until mid World 2. It is quite of a challenge given my previous experience running the Monk and my recent 4-job Fiesta. But at the same time, it actually does pretty well when it does. It does well fighting, and it has arguably some of the best modifiers for strength and stamina overall. Hi folks, this is RotorStorm331 back to doing some more guides for beginners for Final Fantasy V on the jobs. Today we're going to be covering the Monk. The Monk is one of the 3 warrior jobs you do start off with the Wind Crystal, and it's arguably got the best modifiers for strength and stamina. It does pretty well early in the very beginning of the game once you get access to this job. It's actually probably the strongest among the light armor jobs that you do get access to. And thanks to its barehanded abilities, it'll be able to attack up to twice. But unfortunately, it ultimately loses out to more powerful warrior-based jobs like the Knight and Ninja, because Knight gets access to two-handed, while Ninja ultimately out-edges both Monk and Knight in terms of dual wielding. And the fact that the Monk doesn't get access to any weaponry is kind of a big downside for it. Excuse me 1 minute. My apologies. But technically, despite the fact the Monk doesn't get a whole lot of usability in later parts of the game, it does have a few abilities that it can be used in the grand scheme of things. And we'll be covering those along with the modifiers and whatever strengths and weaknesses we're going to be covering. So let's go ahead and get started. So basically, the Monk is basically your unarmed fighter. It's pretty weird in this game because, in Final Fantasy III, because in those games you do not want to have your Monk equipped with any weapons. Of course, this is also one of the first beginner jobs in Final Fantasy I, but they get access to some equipment like staves and nunchucks. But those actually lower the actual attack strength of a Monk, as opposed to when they're fighting with their bare hands instead. But Final Fantasy V is kind of more of a letdown because, unfortunately, this job's barehanded fighting is not very good. Sadly, even with Kaiser Knuckles, which is an accessory that'll boost the Monk's strength up by 5 to improve its overall damage, doesn't really help much at all. Technically, if you want anyone to be running Monk at late parts in the game, especially World 3, it's probably best to get your party members leveled up as much as possible. There isn't a whole lot of places to level up and grind a whole lot unless you're willing to take a chance at interdimensional Rift. And of course, you'll have to go through the version of Castle Tycoon to fight most of the enemies like Iron Giants, Sword Dancers, Death Claws, among others. So you really have to have your characters at a very high level to make full use of Monks if you're going to plan to take them into late game, pretty much. But it does get a few saving graces from other job abilities, but doesn't really get a whole lot on its own when you get to that point of the game. But technically, the whole point of the Monk is to basically master the job so that you can transfer its modifiers and get 2 other notable abilities that we'll go over right now. But first things first, before we cover the abilities, we'll cover the modifiers first. So in terms of the Monk's modifiers, it's got the strongest strength and stamina modifiers together, both having a walloping 26. That's plus 26 for both strength and stamina. It only has +1 on agility and -23 on magic. So sadly, by itself, it's pretty poor doing magic. So unless you want to give it like white magic or whatever, you're going to need to transfer spells from another job to that if you want to make it more reusable. But technically, the Monk's primary goal is to fight for the most part. But unlike the Berserker, you have more control over the Monk than you do with the Berserker. So the Monk has one interesting ability that's exclusive to this as opposed to the other jobs, and that is Kick. Kick is an exclusive ability that any of the party members that switch to Monk get access to, and it basically lets them attack any and all foes, assuming if the attacks land. And it actually does quite plentiful damage in the Pixel Remaster version, unlike the previous versions. So basically, Kick gets a little bit more use in the Pixel remaster as opposed to its past versions. But it's nowhere near as powerful as fighting barehanded, though, unfortunately. So anyway, outside kick, we're going to go over and cover all the other abilities that monks do get when you acquire levels. They have to go up to 7 levels in order to master this job, so we're going to go over those right now. Focus is the first ability that players get when they hit level 1 on Monk. If you remember using Young in Final Fantasy IV, he had an ability called Focus, where he took some time to charge up before performing a more powerful attack that did more damage than he would do normally. And technically, that would, in later versions of Final Fantasy IV/2, that would be Young's more high damaging move, if anything else. But unfortunately, in this game, it's not nearly as strong as it was in Final Fantasy IV, so it's not really seen a whole lot of use, unfortunately. I mean, you could probably slap it on other jobs that would probably get it, but the damage isn't anywhere near as good as you get with dual wielding or two-handed, unfortunately. Barehanded is the second ability that players get with level 2, and this is actually one of the 2 notable abilities you get with Monk. Barehanded not only allows jobs to fight barehanded, but if you have any jobs that have weapons equipped, those jobs will get the Monk's 26 strength regardless. So even if you don't have those jobs fight barehanded, they can benefit from the 26 plus strength modifier they can definitely use. Jobs like Thief and Dancer would get more mileage. You could probably give Ninja, Ranger, any of your other warrior jobs this that are not around Monk's overall damaging capacity, and they could deal even more damage with that applied. So overall, barehanded gets a lot more use in other jobs than by itself. Chakra is the third ability you learn on Monk at level 3. This is basically, from what I learned, it has a spell power of 30. And basically, it's a minor heal that basically allows the monk to heal themselves for small HP gain. But they can also, this ability also cures Poison and Dark. Now, early in the World 1, Poison and Dark are the 2 most common status elements most players would usually run into. And you probably won't have enough money to cover enough antidotes and eye drops to cure the status elements. So Chakra actually does get a little bit more use in terms of for job Fiesta run, because that's actually a more reliable heal than potions. But unfortunately, since the monk has a minus 23 magic modifier, that actually weakens the overall usage of Chakra. Chakra would probably get a little bit more usage if you put it on a mage, but technically if you're using the white mage, it's not really needed with the Chakra, but it definitely does help if you do decide to apply any spells to the monk, that is. Counter is the 4th ability that you learn as a monk, and this is, along with barehanded, probably one of the most coveted abilities, especially for any party member that goes into any of the warrior classes. Basically, Counter allows you to basically have a 50% chance of retaliating against the monster that conducted a physical attack against that party member with Counter. So basically, monks will have this automatically applied when you switch to this job, and that comes in handy if they decide to make a rather foolish attempt to do so. But it can also be a double-edged sword if you're trying to steal items or trying to get blue magic. It's probably not a good idea to have Counter applied to any of your jobs or have a monk while doing that. So basically, if you do want to be learning any of the blue magics or stealing, it's probably best not to have a monk or anyone with counter ability applied in the meantime. But overall, counter is a must-have for anyone going down, taking the straight-out warrior path for the most part. And it'll be useful for those characters that will be using that for the most part. Levels 5, 6, and 7 will give you HP plus 10, 20, and 30, respectively. Initially, I thought these abilities were automatically applied when you master the job, but it turns out it's not. From further studying, it's not the case. So otherwise, you could basically equip this to other jobs with low stamina modifiers, and they could get a little bit more mileage with those. The 30 HP plus is kind of the big difference maker in those situations. So basically, you want to apply those to any job that has very low stamina modifiers, and they can improve your survivability quite nicely. So that covers the abilities and modifiers for the monk job. So what other abilities could we assign the monk to? Now, I was thinking about applying the equipped weapons, but the problem is it might not work with the monk, and I have not really tried it. But if anyone does know if it works on the monk, please let me know in the comments section, which will be exported to YouTube at a future date after this. So if you do know, feel free to leave a comment on that, and I'll be able to make a mental note of that in the future. That is. So what about monk? If you do want to make full use of monk's chakra, you could go with assigning other magics like white, black, summon, blue, or red magics, whatever. But technically, it's probably not a good idea since you only get kicked with monk and it doesn't really sync very well with magic, even if you do decide to apply it to the monk. Now, if you are concerned about monk's defensive capabilities, one thing you could do is give monk the ninja's image. Image just essentially gives you some protection, about at least 1 to 2 attacks in terms of physical attacks. You can also benefit from the ninja's throw as well. That allows them to capitalize on throwing any surplus weaponry at targets, and you can definitely take full advantage of the monk's 26 strength with that. The monk can also benefit greatly with having the samurai's Zanenji, which allows them to toss skill at targets. And of course, if your level's very high when you use it, you'll deal more damage. Of course, if you want to give your monk some protection from physical attacks when they don't trigger counter, you can also go for Shidori, but it's probably runs counter to the monk for the most part, as the monk's supposed to be receiving damage and retaliating. But if you're concerned about defense-wise, the Shidori support ability will also work as well. Now, believe it or not, if you're crazy enough, you can also assign the dance ability to the monk as well. The problem is it won't get the ability to equip the dancer equipment, so you will have to go through the 4 dances that normally associated. But if you trigger Swords Dance with the monk can deal very, very high damage depending on its level and the whatnot. But the 4 times damage to barehanded really makes up for the lack of overall strength that normally does not get later parts of the game. So that's also something you could definitely do. Of course, another defensive ability you can apply to the monk is the hide ability from Bard. If your monk's taking a beating or whatnot, you can always give them the hide ability. But your monks should always be at the front lines most of the time. But if you want to protect them, that's not a bad ideal. Of course, you could also try the Mug ability. I don't know if you're able to perform Steal twice with that move overall, but you can attack and try to steal with Mug for the most part. But I don't think that would work, and you probably might need a knife for that, but that's about as far as I can go. But I'll probably do some testing next time to see whether or not Mug and barehanded actually work pretty well. But if I get back to it, I could do that as well. Of course, you can also assign Jump to give a monk a sort of defense-offense option. Which, of course, they won't deal a whole lot of damage like Dragoons do with Jump, but still it'll give you a defensive option, and it'll allow the monk to retaliate once the time to perform the jump occurs, and you'll be able to get some damage at least, but probably not as high as you would get with weapons equipped, of course. So anyway, that concludes the beginner's guide for Monk. Anyway, we'll be covering Black Mage next. So I'm going to take a small break, get some water, and I'll make preparations, and I'll be right back.